Hello guys, tonight, you're not walking through ancient battlefields or enduring epic sieges. No, tonight your suffering is far more elegant. You are beautiful, you are educated, you are desired, and you spend your days in a gilded apartment above a Venetian canal where candlelight flatters you, the music lies to you, and the city outside would rather you never existed. Before we begin this long, slow unraveling of silk and self-worth, do me a small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing who is falling asleep to the elegant horrors of history. If you'd like to listen to these episodes completely ad-free, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. If you listen in bed, a pair of sleep mask headphones can help you become fully immersed. I've linked the pair I use in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You sit motionless before the mirror, spine straight, chin slightly raised, not from vanity but from training. The glass is small and imperfect, flecked with silver decay, but it captures what it needs. The careful drape of your neckline, the even slope of your shoulders, the soft gleam of your hair, as practiced fingers pin it into place. The older woman behind you, silent and forgettable, twists your curls into the latest Roman fashion, looping ribbons through them with the solemnity of a priest preparing an altar. She does not speak unless you ask her to. You never do. It's easier that way. You're 17, though your body feels older than that already. Not in form, but in purpose. You've been trained and honed for this moment like an instrument. You speak Latin, read poetry, and can quote Cicero and Augustine in the same breath. You play the lute without error and laugh at a nobleman's joke before he finishes telling it. Your voice is low and smooth, your laugh practiced in 3 registers, depending on the rank of the man before you. You know how to walk as if you are not walking. You know how to sit as if seated upon an invisible throne. You know how to seem effortless, which is, ironically, exhausting. This is your presentation day, the day your name, once whispered through tutors' lips and embroidered onto linens, will be written in ledgers instead. You are no longer in training. You're a cortigiana honesta, an honest courtesan, which is to say, a courtesan with an education, poetry, and just enough plausible deniability. You are not a common cortigiana de lume, the kind who lean from windows and call to sailors. No, your light is subtler, refined, a candle behind silk, a promise of sophistication. You are expensive, desired, and entirely for sale. Your gown is a pale green damask, trimmed in silver thread that catches the sunlight as it filters through the shutters. It's modest by Venetian standards, revealing only one shoulder and leaving your collarbones visible, a tasteful compromise between dignity and temptation. Beneath it, your corset is pulled tight enough to shift your breath but not break it. You've already eaten, if you can call it that. A few bites of stewed pear and 3 sips of wine diluted with rosewater. Any more, and your stomach might rebel, any less, and you'll faint before dinner. Outside, the canal chatters softly with the slap of oars against water. A merchant boat creaks as it passes. Voices drift upward from the street below, mostly men, mostly drunk, mostly masked, and none of them matter. Not yet. You glance at the mirror again and try to see what they will see. Dark eyes, wide set and rimmed with just enough kohl to suggest mystery. Lips slightly parted, tinted with crushed berries. Skin powdered to smoothness, but not pallor. You're not trying to look natural. You're trying to look like the idea of nature, improved. You're trying to look like someone who never sweats, never ages, never bleeds. Your heart beats steadily, but not quickly. You've been preparing for this moment since you were 12. Since the first time your mother took you to a poetry recital and told you not to speak unless spoken to. Since the first time she corrected your posture with the tip of her fan. Since the first time your tutor praised your diction but not your insight. He taught you that men like to be flattered by their own intelligence, not yours. You learned quickly, you always do. You reach for the vial of jasmine oil and dab a single drop behind each ear, then another at the hollow of your throat. Too much would be vulgar, too little would be forgettable. There's no room for error. Your reputation begins before you speak a word. It will follow you like a shadow, thinner or darker depending on the angle of the light, but always present. You've already heard your name on other women's lips, spoken with admiration and envy and warning. You are the newest, the most promising, the one to watch, which is flattering, of course, but it also means they will delight in your downfall when it comes. You rise from the stool and smooth the folds of your gown, your fingers pausing briefly over a tiny snag in the hem, one no one else will notice, but which you have already memorized. Perfection is a requirement, not a goal. You nod once to the woman behind you, and she steps back without comment. Her name is Maria, or Lucia, or something else you no longer ask. She will be paid regardless. You leave the room slowly, each step measured, your heels just audible enough on the tiled floor to remind the world you're approaching. The apartment is quiet. Too quiet, really, but that's intentional. Everything around you is curated for effect. The filtered light, the muted tapestries, the faint scent of lavender and varnish. You walk past the harp you no longer play for pleasure, past the bowl of fruit you cannot eat without staining your teeth. Everything here is appearance. Even hunger is choreographed. In the antechamber, you pause by the long mirror and glance at your reflection once more. This time you do not look at your face. You look at your eyes. They do not blink. Good. You practice a smile. Not too eager, not too cold. Just enough to suggest warmth and interest and nothing else. You have been warned not to smile too broadly. It makes men nervous, especially from women they have not yet paid. Better to be inviting than open. Better to be mysterious than known. From the corridor you hear the rustle of robes, the brief clatter of a walking stick on marble. He is early. Of course he is. They always are on the first visit. Eagerness is still allowed for now. Later, they will arrive late, or drunk, or not at all. But not tonight. Tonight, you are a prize, still wrapped. You are the unopened letter, the unopened gift, the unopened door. You turn your head slowly as the door opens. You do not blink. You do not smile yet. That comes later. Instead, you lower your gaze just slightly, as if caught off guard. Flattered, but modest. Practiced. Perfect. The man who enters is tall, grey-haired, robed in gold and red, with rings on 3 fingers and wine on his breath. His name is Senor Alvisa, a senator's cousin and a frequent patron of the theatre. You know this because you have studied him, not out of affection, but necessity. You know who he's funded, who he's ruined, who he's replaced. He is powerful, yes, but more importantly, he is predictable. You can work with predictable. He stops a few steps away and bows slightly, enough to show respect but not submission. You mirror the gesture exactly to scale. This is your first dance and every step counts. He opens his mouth to speak, but you get there first. Just a breath ahead. Just enough to steer the tone. Senor Alvisa, you say, your voice soft but not meek. I have heard so many stories of your generosity I was beginning to suspect they were myth. It is the perfect opening. Flattering, humorous, and false. He laughs. Of course, they always do. You've given him permission to enjoy himself, which is the only permission that matters. He offers his hand, and you take it lightly, brushing your fingers against his knuckles as if unsure whether to kiss them or not. You know precisely what you're doing. You know precisely what he wants. You've been taught that charm is not seduction, but precision. Every gesture, every glance, every breath is calculated to sell the illusion of spontaneity, that you are delighted by his presence, that this was your choice, that this moment matters. You lead him into the receiving room, where the wine is already poured and the candles already lit. You note his eyes sweep across the space, taking inventory, comparing it to others. He'll find no fault. Not tonight. You are new. You are perfect. You are curated for consumption. You do not flinch as he touches your arm. You do not smile when he compliments your voice. You do not let your shoulders drop. You keep your posture, your tone, your mask, because this is not a flirtation. It is a transaction, and you have been dressed, trained, and polished for this exact moment. As the servant draws the curtain behind you, and the music begins from the adjoining room, and you tilt your head just slightly to meet his eyes, you realize with cold clarity that you're not nervous. You are not afraid. You are ready. because you understand what this is, because you've been made for it, because tonight you are not a girl, you are a product, and the show is just beginning. Time passes. Your debut went well, and you've had meetings with more men. Now you are seated across from a senator twice your age, quoting Petrarch with just enough hesitation to suggest modesty rather than mastery. The words fall gently from your lips, practiced but not rehearsed, like pearls tipped from a velvet glove. The room is warm with candlelight and the sour sweetness of overripe grapes. He watches you, not as a student is watched, but as a collector examines a coin, assessing value, novelty, condition. When you reach the final line, he claps once, slowly, and smiles. How rare it is, he says, to meet a woman who can speak as beautifully as she looks. You thank him with a small incline of your head, and do not correct the assumption that your beauty comes first, your thoughts second. It would not be useful. This is your third sitting with him. The first time, he tested your posture. The second, your voice. Tonight, he tests your mind. Not to be challenged, of course, but to be reflected. He wants to hear his favourite verses in a younger voice, wants to debate philosophy only to win, wants to speak about Plato and feel like Socrates. You learn this by the end of the first hour. You learn quickly. You must. He is a powerful man. He governs nothing directly, but his influence winds through the Senate like canal water through a grating, quiet, necessary, and faintly unpleasant. He is proud of his books and his wine cellar, and of the miniature Greek busts he has arranged in exact symmetry behind him, which he gestures toward whenever making a point. You have been seated directly opposite him in a lacquered chair, too straight to relax in. Your goblet of wine untouched, your spine aching, but your expression is placid, even interested. You let him hold forth. You offer laughter in the right places, pauses in the right moments, and just enough contradiction to make him feel clever when he overrules it. He asks you what you think of Cicero's De Officiis, and you reply that you find it compelling, if predictably masculine in its priorities. He grins, delighted, and launches into an anecdote about Stoicism. He does not ask what you meant. He does not want to know. You are a wind-up mirror with long eyelashes, a listener with decorative thoughts. He praises your wit, but only as decoration, like a carving on a lute. Beautiful, yes, but not meant to be played in earnest. You sip your wine slowly, counting the minutes in the rhythm of the vials in the next room. You are here for 3 hours. You know this because his steward told your steward, and your steward told you. Time in this life is no longer yours to keep or waste. It is traded, blocked, measured. You learn the contours of 3-hour charm like a dancer learns her marks. You begin strong, soften in the middle, offer one glimpse of melancholy near the end. Men like that, the illusion of a secret, gently confessed. It makes them feel chosen. You are always careful never to offer too much. Sincerity, like skin, must be artfully veiled. When he rises, you rise. When he offers his arm, you take it lightly. When he tells you that your Latin is exquisite and your mind far too fine for your station, you smile and say, "That's very kind." You do not ask what station he believes you occupy. You already know. You are the decorative intellect, the clever exception, the rare flower that blooms only for him. He says you are not like the others. He says it with affection. He says it as a compliment. He means it as a promise. What he does not realize, or chooses not to, is that every man says that, and every man means it only for as long as it flatters him. Outside, the night has turned damp. The air smells of seawater and old silk. You part ways beneath the portico, where 2 gondolas bob in the water like docile animals. His steps retreat behind you, with the slow confidence of a man who believes he's gifted you something, his attention, his approval, his presence. You are meant to be grateful. You kiss his ring, not his hand, not his cheek, and murmur something about how much you've learned. He chuckles and tells you to keep reading. Then he disappears into the shadows with his steward trailing behind. You do not follow. You have your own way home. The walk back to your apartment is brief, but not uneventful. The streets of Venice are always awake. Not alive precisely, but alert in the way that cities made of masks and secrets tend to be. There are figures in cloaks and figures in rouge, sailors and scholars and silent men who watch you without moving. You are recognized, not by name but by silhouette, by the tilt of your chin and the curve of your bodice. You are known, or rather guessed at. A pair of younger men pass you and do not speak, but one of them raises his gaze just enough to give you a look. It is not vulgar. It is worse. The look of someone who knows you are for sale and is doing the math. He does not stop. He does not need to. The arithmetic has been done. You are not worth his fortune, you are worth his fantasy. You continue on in silence, the hem of your gown skimming the damp stones, your thoughts held tightly in your throat. You do not look behind you. That would suggest uncertainty. You have been taught that a courtesan must never appear uncertain. She must know the city better than her clients do. She must always walk like she belongs, even when she is watched like a trespasser. When you reach your building, your maid is waiting, lantern in hand. She does not ask how it went. She does not comment on the time. She steps aside to let you pass, then shuts the door with a soft click. Inside, everything smells of wax and lavender water. You remove your gloves one finger at a time, hang your cloak by the door, and walk to the vanity without sitting. In the mirror, your face looks untouched. Your lipstick has not smudged. Your hair has not loosened. Your expression is unreadable. That is the goal. You undress slowly, carefully unhooking the stays of your gown and folding the fabric away from your skin. Underneath, you are still you, your body neither sculpted nor ruined, your breath steady, your heart slow. But something always shifts after an evening like this, not because anything happened, but because so much didn't. You remember the senator's eyes darting toward your chest between discussions of virtue. You remember the way he interrupted you during a passage from Ovid, only to repeat the same idea with different words. You remember the warmth in his voice when he said you had the mind of a man, as if that were the highest praise imaginable, as if your thoughts were not your own until they were likened to his. You used to think that knowledge would be your escape, that if you read enough, learned enough, became clever enough, you might move beyond your station, but all it's done is make you more expensive. Men want a courtesan who reads Cicero so they can say they've heard Cicero quoted in bed. They want you fluent in Latin so they can marvel at your pronunciation, not your ideas. You are not an equal. You are a mirror with a memory, a prize with a library, a conversational accomplishment. You light a candle by your bed and sit for a moment in the hush. Outside, the city sighs and shifts, its bridges groaning under the weight of late footsteps. The water whispers its usual nothings to the stone. You stare at the flame and try to think of something unrelated to tonight. A line of poetry not discussed, a fragment of music unsung, but your mind refuses. It replays the evening in looped fragments. The laughter, the glance, the moment you nodded when you wanted to speak, the moment you spoke when you should have stayed silent. You wonder briefly what he'll say about you tomorrow. To his friends, to his wife, to himself. You wonder if he'll call you brilliant or merely refreshing. You wonder how long you'll remain novel. You wonder when your cleverness will become tedious, threatening, or worse, familiar. You do not cry. That would be indulgent. You remove your jewellery one piece at a time, setting each item into its velvet-lined box with the care of someone putting away tools, which, in a way, you are. You blow out the candle, and when your head finally touches the pillow and your body begins its slow descent into sleep, you are not thinking of the senator's smile or the way his fingers brushed yours. You are thinking of the line you didn't say, the one you wanted to say, the one that might have made him pause, but you didn't say it because you're clever, and clever women know better. One morning, your maid counts coins while you soak in rosewater. Her fingers move swiftly across the polished table, stacking ducats into neat, disciplined towers that gleam in the light from the open shutters. You can hear them more than see them, the soft, metallic click as each piece joins the next. 60 for the senator, 20 for the wine, 10 for the musicians, 12 for the steward. You lie motionless in the bath, the floral heat loosening the muscles between your shoulder blades, though not the ones in your jaw. The scent is overwhelming. rose and milk with a trace of lavender oil and something sharper beneath it. You've grown used to smelling like wealth. It no longer seems like luxury, it smells like maintenance. Your knees float just beneath the surface, skin flushed pink from the warmth, ringed faintly with soap. This is not indulgence, this is preparation. You are not here to rest, you are here to preserve. The senator is already sending word of his satisfaction, and word travels faster than plague in this city. That means others will come, and you must be ready. Not for flirtation or delight or romance, but for negotiation. The true business of beauty doesn't happen in the bedroom. It happens in the ledger. You rise slowly and wrap yourself in linen, still warm from the hearth, as your maid recites the final sum without being asked. After expenses, we are ahead by 14, she says. Her voice is smooth, practiced, impersonal. You nod, and she continues dressing you, layer by layer, from underthings to bodice, her hands tugging ribbons and smoothing seams without comment. You do not speak. You're thinking about pearls. Specifically the necklace you wore last week, on loan technically from a merchant who expects it returned by the end of the season, unless you purchase it outright. 42 ducats, nearly 3 weeks' income, unless your next client is generous or drunk. You're not worried, not yet, but you are aware, always. You sit before the mirror and apply your face like paint to a canvas. The same strokes, the same colours, the same careful absence of expression, kohl at the eyes, a touch of rouge at the cheeks. Just enough colour on the lips to suggest life without enthusiasm. The effect is elegant, disinterested, expensive, the look of a woman who is desired precisely because she does not need to be. There's a knock at the door. Your maid answers, and a moment later the steward enters, hat in hand, smile already affixed. He is short, round, slightly sweat-slicked, and dressed too finely for someone who walks this much. He bows low and announces with some ceremony that a contract has been drawn up. You already know which one. You asked him to arrange it 3 days ago after your third visit with the wine merchant. He wants to be named your principal patron, publicly, contractually, and for the duration of the season. He says it's for peace of mind. You know it's for bragging rights. The steward lays out the parchment on your writing desk, weighting the corners with inkwells. You approach without hurry, your gown rustling against your ankles. The document is elegant, fine script, expensive vellum, and 3 flourishes too many on your name. The language is precise but vague, as all good contracts are. You are to dine with him 3 times weekly, to accompany him to the theatre and to his mother's villa on the mainland. You are not required to perform any particular act, but are expected to offer affection and companionship appropriate to the role. You know exactly what that means. You also know what it doesn't mean. In return, you're promised a monthly sum, a gift of jewellery, and a silk gown from his preferred tailor, in exchange for public loyalty, private availability, and discretion regarding anyone else. The terms are generous, more generous than you expected. You suspect he is nervous, not of you, but of losing you. The steward clears his throat and gestures to the line at the bottom. He asks that you sign before noon, he says. He wishes to have the documents sealed and sent before supper. Of course he does. Men like that always want it formal. They think a signature makes it love. You sit and dip your quill. The ink is thick and dark, and it takes longer than you'd like to dry. You sign your name with a practiced hand and a still face. The steward smiles, bows again, and begins rolling up the parchment. Before he leaves, he places a small pouch beside your writing case. The deposit. You do not need to count it. Your maid will. You simply nod, and he exits, still grinning as if he's accomplished something meaningful. You do not rise at once. You sit for a moment in the quiet, watching the sunlight shift across the rug. It's a fine rug Turkish, worn at the edges but still soft beneath your bare feet. A gift from a diplomat 2 seasons ago, forgotten by him the moment he returned to Padua. You remember his perfume more vividly than his name. Your maid clears her throat. "Shall I have the tailor sent?" she asks. You nod. She does not ask which fabric or colour. She knows the answer already. Crimson with silver trim. It is the merchant's favourite. You hate it. Later that afternoon, you meet with your accountant, a thin man with no humour and perfect teeth. He opens your ledger like a priest opens a hymn book and reviews the past quarter aloud. You listen with half an ear while sipping cooled wine, payments from the senator, partial deposit from the nobleman, a brooch still held in trust against a 20-ducat debt. 3 dresses commissioned, 1 cancelled, 1 returned. Rent on the apartment increased again. Fees for the steward, fees for the musicians, fees for the bathwater. Always the bathwater. You sign twice. Once to confirm the figures, once to authorise withdrawal from your reserve. When he leaves, he reminds you, as always, that appearance is investment. You must remain visible, available, perfect, like a shop window for a merchant who never closes. You used to think courtesans had freedom, the illusion of independence wrapped in silk and song. But what you've learned is this. You do not belong to yourself. You belong to the contract, the appointment, the receipt. You are bought and scheduled, praised and costed. Even your laughter has a price. Even your absence must be explained. In the early evening, a letter arrives on scented paper, lilac slightly smudged, with a note from a minor baron asking for your company at a poetry reading in 2 nights' time. You consider it for only a moment before declining. You're under contract now. The terms are clear. And while you may entertain at dinner, you may not attend events with other men. Not for the rest of the season. Not unless the merchant is present. Not unless he approves. You write the reply yourself. Not because you must, but because you prefer your handwriting to your steward's. It is small, elegant, and precisely the kind of handwriting men like to fantasize about receiving in secret. You thank the baron politely. You suggest another time. You close with a line of Petrarch which he will no doubt misinterpret as affection. The pouch of coin from earlier now sits on your vanity beside your combs. You open it briefly and tip it into your hand. The ducats are warm from the sun. You count them automatically, even though your maid already has. 70. Exactly as promised. You run your fingers over them once, then pour them into the small strongbox hidden behind the curtain panel. Your reflection in the mirror watches you do this without expression. It has been 9 months since your debut. 9 months since your hair was pinned for the first time by trembling hands, and you were sent smiling into the arms of strangers. In that time, you have learned how to walk, how to bow, how to quote, how to withhold. You have learned to wear perfume that smells like restraint. You have learned to turn bruises into blush and exhaustion into allure. You have learned to assess men the way butchers assess meat, by price, texture, and shelf life. But what you have learned most is how to smile while being valued, like silk, like a gemstone, like a painting whose price rises only when it is admired from a distance. 2 weeks later, you wake in your silk-draped bed beside a snoring man with wine on his breath. His arm is flung across your stomach, heavy and imprecise, as though claiming territory rather than offering affection. His body is warm and slack, exhaling sour air into the folds of your pillow, and his ring has left a faint red dent on your forearm where it pressed against your skin in sleep. You shift slowly, careful not to wake him. Not because you fear him, that would be too dramatic. It's simply that waking him would mean speaking, and at the moment, silence is the only currency you still own outright. You sit up and push the curtain aside. The shutters are cracked, letting in a sliver of early Venetian light, too pale to be gold, too cold to be kind. The canal outside murmurs faintly with the sound of passing boats and someone whistling off-key. You know the song. It's popular this month. All the gondoliers have taken it up, which means by next week no one will admit they ever liked it. You ease out of bed and cross the room barefoot, stepping over a discarded tunic, a half-drained goblet, a pair of embroidered gloves that do not belong to you. Your own slippers are waiting by the window seat, neatly placed by your maid last night. The robe she's left is pale blue with pearl buttons, soft, heavy, and utterly impractical. You wrap it around yourself and sit. He will not wake for another hour at least. The wine was strong. You made sure of it. The wine merchant has taken to spending the night twice a week now. Not part of the contract, of course. That part is always vague, companionship appropriate to the role. What that means in practice is that he arrives when he wishes, stays as long as he likes, and expects the same level of polish regardless of the hour. You have learned to keep one eye open and your temper submerged. When he finally stirs, you're already dressed and seated by the hearth, pretending to read a volume of Horace you know by heart. He yawns, stretches, scratches himself in 3 places, and calls for breakfast as if this were his house. You do not correct him. You simply rise, offer a few warm words, and gesture toward the tray already prepared. He's delighted, of course. He believes himself well cared for. He believes himself romantic. He believes he is in control. He leaves before midday, and your maid clears the linens without a word. She knows not to ask. She has seen you smile through worse. You spend the afternoon writing letters carefully, slowly, in your finest hand. One to a patron in Rome who once sent you poetry, just enough to keep his interest warm. One to a tailor who keeps trying to double-charge you for silks you never ordered. One to a fellow courtesan whose cousin has begun asking questions about your schedule. You fold each page neatly, seal each one with wax, and hand them off to your steward, who assures you he'll deliver them personally. He won't. He never does. The following morning, you ask after the replies. He says they've not yet come. You nod, but you know the truth. The merchant is reading them first. This is the hidden clause, the one no contract puts in writing. But every woman learns quickly enough. Once you are kept, you are watched. Every letter may be intercepted. Every conversation may be overheard. Every favour you request is logged, measured, tallied. You are admired, yes, but never trusted. 2 days later, you attempt to take a walk along the Zattera promenade. Nothing unusual, just an hour of air and sea breeze, something your physician recommended last winter. But as you step into the waiting gondola, you notice the rower is new, younger, broader, less deferential. He nods, but does not speak, and when you mention the weather, he does not respond. You glance behind you and see your steward leaning against the wall of the building, arms crossed, pretending to smoke. You ask the rower to take you around the Giudecca instead, and he hesitates for just a moment before agreeing. That's when you know you are not alone. You are not ever alone. The ride is brief. You return early with nothing purchased, nothing visited. When you re-enter your apartment, your maid does not ask how the promenade was. She only nods and removes your cloak. She knows. Everyone knows. A week later, a gift arrives, a carved ivory comb, delicate and expensive. No note accompanies it, but you recognize the merchant's taste immediately. You admire the detail, the way the teeth are smooth as bone, the mother of pearl inlay. It is beautiful. It is thoughtful. It is another reminder. Because now every gift arrives with a condition, the silk robe. He wants you to wear it when he calls. The necklace, he expects to see it at the theatre next week. The comb, he will mention it in conversation, waiting to see if you remembered to use it. These are not tokens of affection. They are surveillance in satin form. Your world is shrinking. Subtly, elegantly, but undeniably. Once you could visit the apothecary alone, now your steward insists on escorting you. For your safety, he says. Once you could linger at the bookbinder's thumbing through sets and plays, now the merchant frowns when you mention a playwright he hasn't read. Once you could reply to letters freely, now you delay responses until you're certain they won't be intercepted. Once you were admired, now you are managed. You do not speak of this aloud, not even to your maid, especially not to your maid. You simply adjust, gradually, almost invisibly, so that by the time the change is complete, it feels like it has always been this way. The greatest trick Venice plays is not in its masks or its mirrors, but in the way it convinces you that your cage is a stage. At first, it is flattering. Everyone wants to know your name. Poets mention you in verse. Artists sketch your silhouette in the margins of their commissions. Men bow when they pass you in the piazza, and their wives pretend not to look. You are the subject of conversation at salons and dinners, always with a hint of admiration wrapped in envy. You feel powerful. You feel chosen. You are neither. You are a spectacle, permitted, applauded, and tightly controlled. The moment you say too much, appear too often, ask too plainly, you will be replaced. Not with malice, with silence. The same silence that has buried hundreds of women just like you. Women who thought they could bargain with their visibility. Women who believed admiration was safety. women who forgot that performance is only permitted so long as it pleases the audience. And so you pace, not dramatically, not noisily, simply and silently, from one end of your private chambers to the other, your slippers whispering against the tile. You pass the harp you rarely play, the vanity you rarely enjoy, the mirror you no longer trust. Your fingers trail across the surface of your writing desk, then return to your sides. You glance toward the window. You do not open it. You pause at the door that leads downstairs and consider for just a moment stepping outside without permission. No escort, no steward. Just 5 minutes of real air. Then you remember the merchant's voice. Software generous. Concerned. You must be careful, Kara. The city is full of people who might take advantage of someone like you. You smile at the memory, not because it's sweet, but because it's effective. You turn away from the door. You are not free. You are comfortable, decorated, protected, watched, and the door, though never locked, is always closed. A week later, at the opera, you notice a new face at the box beside yours. At first, it doesn't register. You're focused on the aria, pretending interest in a tenor who thinks passion is measured in volume. When you glance sideways, you catch the movement. Her fan snapping closed, her neck turning too sharply, a laugh just slightly too loud. She's seated alone, which is already a message. Her gown is peach silk, far too modern for this crowd, and her sleeves are edged with gold thread that glints each time she raises her glass. She is young, new, and worse, deliberate. You've seen this before, though not for a while. A new courtesan arrives, perhaps recently from Padua or Florence, perhaps trained by someone ambitious, someone who taught her how to navigate attention like a gondolier navigates tides. She pretends to be disinterested in the stage, pretends not to notice who is watching and who is whispering, but every movement of her wrist and eyebrow is calibrated for display. You know this game because you used to play it. She laughs too freely, shows too much ankle, but somehow it works. The men nearby tilt toward her without realizing they're doing it. One offers her his opera glass. Another shifts closer, murmuring something she pretends not to hear. You watch all of this through your own lowered lashes while smiling faintly at your companion's commentary on the performance. He thinks you're amused by the soprano's vibrato. You're not. You're listening to the whispers behind your name being replaced. It has been over 3 years since your own debut. You remember the way men used to lean in when you laughed, the questions they asked about your reading, the way poets followed you down corridors like hopeful dogs. Back then, you were the one with new sleeves and louder laughter. You don't resent the girl. Not truly. You resent the arithmetic, the unspoken rule that each season demands a newer face. When the performance ends, you rise with the others and prepare to descend the marble steps to your waiting gondola. But at the bottom of the staircase, you find yourself briefly beside her. Someone else's escort has paused to tighten a cloak, and the two of you stand momentarily shoulder to shoulder. You glance over and offer a soft, professional smile, the kind courtesans use when acknowledging each other in public, a nod to shared understanding without warmth. She returns it, but with a flicker of amusement behind her eyes. She knows who you are. That much is clear. She knows your name, your patron, the fabric of your last gown, and the price of your apartment. You, however, know nothing about her. Not yet. That is the first imbalance. You step into your gondola and leave the theatre in silence. Your companion talks of music and poor staging choices. You nod and smile and agree when appropriate, but your mind is still on her fan. The way she twirled it without looking, the way the crowd seemed to lean in her direction even when she wasn't speaking. That's the thing about beauty in Venice. It doesn't have to last. It only has to be momentary, noticeable and new. Back at your apartment, you undress slowly, unpinning each curl with more force than necessary. Your maid says nothing, but she sets your slippers by the bed without the usual care. Even she has noticed. The city doesn't need time to shift. It simply does, as if it's been waiting for an excuse. The next morning, the news arrives in pieces. Not letters, not formal announcements, just fragments from mouths that don't know you're listening. The dressmaker says she's requested 6 gowns in the last 10 days, all in unusual colours. The apothecary mentions she prefers lavender oil. A poet, one who used to write about you, recites a new verse at a salon. It references golden sleeves, laughter like bells, and the smell of ripe peaches. You smile when you hear it. You sip your wine. You do not react. That night, your merchant, the one whose contract still defines your hours, arrives later than usual. His cheeks are ruddy, and his voice is full of theatre gossip. He mentions that new girl, calls her delightful, says she made a joke about Cicero that was shockingly clever. You laugh along with him and refill his glass, even though you know precisely which joke she told. You used it once, 2 years ago. It wasn't that clever then either. When he leaves, he forgets his gloves. You send them back the next morning with a note. Short, polite, affectionate. He does not reply. You begin to see her more often. At the markets, in church, though she stands just long enough to be noticed before slipping away. At salons where you are no longer invited, hosted by men who once claimed your presence made the evening. Each time, she looks perfect, slightly overdressed, slightly too confident, but in a way that draws eyes. She is good at this. That is what unnerves you. She doesn't need to be better. She just needs to be next. Your steward begins suggesting fewer outings. Your invitations thin. A client cancels citing illness, though you see him later that week across the square laughing beside her. One of your gowns comes back from the tailor cut slightly wrong. A seam too high, the waistline too sharp. You wonder whether it's intentional. You wonder whether it matters. You reach for your usual strategies. The quiet messages, the artful rumours, the old allies in drawing rooms and chanceries. But the responses are slow, vague, apologetic. One patron writes to say he is travelling. Another says he has entered a season of reflection. A third simply does not write back. The silence is almost elegant. Your maid brings you the news you dread without meaning to. She enters the room holding a folded sheet of paper with no wax seal. "This was left at the door," she says. You take it slowly, unfold it, and read the brief note. The merchant regrets he must cancel his next visit due to an urgent matter of business. He sends his compliments and hopes to reschedule soon. It is signed by his steward. You place the paper on your vanity beside the comb he gave you. You stare at it for a moment, not reading it, just looking. Your maid asks whether to prepare your dinner. You say no. She hesitates, then retreats. You remain seated long after the candle has burned low. You think of the opera, of the way her head tilted when she laughed. You think of the poet's words dripping with metaphor. You think of your merchant, whose gaze has already shifted, though he still believes himself loyal. You think of all the times you smiled at men while calculating how long they'd stay interested. Now, someone else is doing the calculation. You write a letter that evening. You use your finest ink and your smallest, neatest script. It is addressed to a lesser nobleman, one who once promised you a villa, long before the merchant's offer. You flatter him. You suggest an evening of poetry and music. You close with a line from Horace that implies longing without desperation. You send it with your steward in the morning. He returns before midday, empty-handed. "He was not at home," he says. "I left it with his housekeeper." He does not return with a reply. You send a second letter, this one to a scholar, a man who used to ask for your commentary on Aristotle between performances. You ask whether he's returned from Padua. You mention the new Florentine play. You sign with a smile in ink. No reply. You begin to understand. Not all at once, but gradually the way a boat begins to drift before the oarsman notices. The way a song begins to fade before the final note. The way silence arrives before it is acknowledged. You are no longer the centre of the story. You are becoming the footnote. One day you notice a faint ache in your abdomen. At first you think it's just that. Sadness, disappointment, the ordinary ache of watching your name slip from the mouths that once spoke it sweetly. But by the fourth day you realize something is wrong. The ache in your abdomen is sharper now, unmistakably physical. It bites when you sit, cramps when you eat, pulses low and constant. You say nothing. You straighten your posture. You smile when spoken to. You drink mint tea and pretend it helps. Pain is not permitted in your profession, not visibly. You may withhold affection. You may fake pleasure. But you must never show pain unless a man has caused it for his own delight. Illness Real illness threatens the illusion, and the illusion is all you have left. You try to rest, but sleep does not come easily. You drift in and out, pulled under by the rhythmic grip of discomfort. You wake damp, uneasy, disoriented. One morning, your maid finds you sitting in the corner of the bedroom, fully dressed, unable to recall how you got there. She says nothing. She leaves a tray of broth and crushed herbs and closes the door without looking at you. You eat what you can. The rest goes cold. A week later, you are due to attend a musical performance hosted by a minor nobleman. You cannot afford to cancel. Not now. Not with the rumours circling like gulls. So you rise early and soak in lavender water. Grit your teeth through the pain and allow your maid to lace your gown tighter than usual. You powder your cheeks a shade warmer, just enough to conceal the grey. When your steward knocks, you're already waiting by the door. The nobleman's salon is crowded as always, though less so than it might have been 2 seasons ago, when your presence alone could fill a room. Still, you are noticed. You're seated. You are poured wine that you do not drink. The music is soft, plucked strings and sighing reeds, but your body is not in the room. Your spine throbs, your stomach churns. You nod at the proper phrases, smile at the expected jokes, and offer a few quiet words of appreciation to the musician. You excuse yourself as soon as is polite. Back at your apartment, you double over before reaching the bed. Your maid hears you from the next room and enters without knocking. She does not speak. She kneels beside you and waits until your breathing slows. Then, without asking, she sends for the physician. You haven't seen him in months, not since a patron requested you have your teeth examined for reassurance. He arrives mid-morning, carrying his case like a holy relic, his gloves spotless, his expression one of detached professionalism. He does not bow. He does not flirt. That is why you tolerate him. He examines you with clinical disinterest, pressing here, prodding there, making notes in a hand you cannot read. You grit your teeth through the examination and say as little as possible. When he finishes, he nods once and begins preparing a tincture at your writing desk, grinding something bitter with a pestle worn from years of repetition. "It is not serious," he says finally, "but it must remain private." You do not ask what he suspects. You know better. Diagnoses are dangerous. Labels travel. A whispered word can end a career faster than any scandal. Discomfort, he offers instead. Delicacy, perhaps. Nerves. He says these things not because they're true, but because they are socially acceptable. He leaves you with a bottle of laudanum and instructions to use it sparingly. You nod. Your maid tucks the bottle into your nightstand and lights a fresh candle, though it is not yet evening. She asks if you would like company. You say no. That night, the pain worsens. You try to distract yourself with music, with verse, with a book of riddles you once found charming. Nothing helps. The tincture does for a while. It wraps your thoughts in gauze and hushes the panic. But it does not cure anything. It only makes the hours pass without clarity. You begin to live in small increments, one event to the next, one appearance to the next, one smile to the next. Each gown becomes heavier, each sentence harder to remember. Your maid begins choosing simpler hairstyles. You say thank you and do not ask why. Eventually you're called to perform again, not sing, not act, but attend. A small concert in the chamber of a young duchess whose husband collects beautiful women the way others collect books. You cannot refuse. You owe her cousin a favour. You owe her husband a debt. So you prepare. You take the laudanum earlier than advised, just enough to dull the edge. Your pulse slows. Your thoughts soften. Your hands move more smoothly across silken ribbon, as if they have forgotten to tremble. You look in the mirror and see no difference. You arrive on time, accompanied by your steward, who says little and glances at you often. You're escorted inside, past a courtyard lined with lemon trees, past other guests whose eyes skim over your gown with dispassionate curiosity. You are not the novelty. You are the expectation. The music begins. A lute, a flute, a contralto voice singing something in Provençal. You sit near the hearth, hands folded in your lap, body angled for optimal display. You smile when the Duchess glances your way. You nod when the Baron offers commentary on the composition. You lean in when the ambassador mutters something crude about the soprano's breath control. You are present. You are poised. You are perfect. Your stomach rebels beneath the boning of your corset. You shift your weight slightly and hope it reads as elegance. You sip water and hope it hides the dryness in your throat. You laugh once, lightly, and hope it sounds convincing. The room is warm, the candles low, the air thick with perfume and sweat. You begin to float, not outwardly but inwardly, a slow, untethered drift beneath the surface of your smile. The laudanum dulls the ache but steals your clarity. You forget the name of the woman beside you. You forget what poem the Duke just quoted. You forget which composer you were supposed to compliment. But none of that matters. You are beautiful. You're seated. You are seen. You make it through the evening without collapsing, without vomiting, without complaint. That is considered success. When you return home, your maid undresses you slowly, her hand steady, expression unreadable. She unpins your hair and wipes the paint from your cheeks. She sets your shoes aside and pulls the blankets over you without comment. You're not well, but you look it, and that is enough. You lie in the dark and stare at the ceiling. You cannot remember the last time someone touched you without expectation. You cannot remember the last time someone asked if you were in pain and meant it. You drift in and out, body quiet, thoughts blurred, muscles sore. You dream of music you cannot name, of hands that are not yours, of mirrors that do not reflect anything at all. A few weeks pass. The pain is quieter now, or perhaps you've simply grown used to it. The physician no longer visits. The bottle beside your bed grows lighter. A carriage arrives. It pulls up to the canal with little fanfare. No crest, no liveried escort, no entourage of musicians or lackeys, just the low roll of wheels and the thud of boots on stone. Your maid opens the shutters and pauses briefly as she peers down at the figure stepping onto the landing. She turns to you and says simply, "It's him." You do not ask who. You already know. Your first patron, the one who welcomed you into this profession with gifts of silver bracelets and clumsy declarations of admiration, has returned. It has been over 2 years since you last saw him. He vanished quietly after his wife fell ill, and for a time there were whispers that he'd gone to Naples or joined the clergy or taken vows of chastity out of guilt. None of it was true. He simply disappeared, as men often do when they're no longer entertained. Now he is back, and he is alone. He ascends the stairs, slowly. You hear the weight in his footsteps, the familiar rhythm of expensive boots against your marble landing. When the door opens, you are already seated, composed, and dressed in pale violet, a colour he once claimed reminded him of the sea at dusk. You chose it without thinking. Old instincts die hard. He smiles when he sees you. A genuine, tired, melancholic smile. "You haven't changed," he says. "You have, of course. Everyone has. But you thank him anyway." He takes your hand and kisses it, holding it just a fraction longer than decorum allows. His breath is warm and slightly bitter. You notice the lines on his face are deeper now, his shoulders narrower, his once black hair tinged at the edges with grey. He looks as though he has been gently worn down by something quiet and permanent. He stays for an hour. You talk about nothing in particular. Music, weather, how little the city has changed. He does not ask about your health or your recent absence from the salons, or the rumours about the merchant's new courtesan. He does not need to. He is here because the novelty of youth has turned sour, and he now finds comfort in the familiar. Before he leaves, he pauses by the window and glances toward the canal. "You always kept this view," he says. "I remember." You do not correct him. The apartment changed twice since he last visited. He is not remembering you. He is remembering the idea of you, the version that flattered him, amused him, made him feel momentarily interesting. He returns 2 days later, unannounced but expected. This time he brings wine and flowers slightly past their prime. He comments on your dress, your hair, the colour of your earrings. He does not compliment your mind or your voice or your conversation. Not anymore. He is not here for those things. He is here for the shape of your memory. The third time, he stays overnight. You do not pretend to enjoy it. You do not perform the way you used to. No breathless flattery, no feigned surprise, no careful scripting of delight. You let him have what he wants, and nothing more. He does not seem to notice the difference, or perhaps he does, and he prefers it. Predictability can feel like affection when you're old and tired and lonely. In the morning, he offers you a new arrangement. Not a contract, not formal, just an understanding, as he puts it. He will visit when he wishes. He will cover your expenses. He will ensure you are looked after. The words are soft, almost tender, as if he is proposing marriage rather than possession. You do not hesitate. You say yes. The terms are generous enough, if slightly reduced from what they once were. The sum is smaller, the visits fewer, the gifts less extravagant. He apologizes for this, murmuring something about estates and nephews and the unpredictability of wine tariffs. You nod and smile and assure him it is no trouble. After all, it isn't. Not really. You were never expecting love. You move through the next week in a kind of slow ritual. He arrives in the afternoon, sits in the same chair, drinks from the same goblet. He asks for the same songs, the same stories. You find yourself repeating the same phrases without thinking, like lines from a play you once knew by heart. It's easier this way, less tiring, less dangerous. You begin to notice the small changes. He no longer asks if you've read anything new. He does not bring poems or books. He tells the same jokes he told 3 years ago and laughs at them with the same boyish delight, even when you do not. He watches you undress with less hunger and more nostalgia. When he touches you, it is with something approaching reverence, or perhaps just regret. He never asks about the other men. He never mentions the years in between. It is as if time simply paused the moment he left and resumed now that he has returned. You let him believe this. You let yourself believe it too on the quieter days. Not because it is true, but because truth has become less useful than routine. Your maid says nothing about his reappearance. She lays out his preferred wine before each visit, places fresh linen on the bed, and turns down the lamp to just the right glow. She no longer needs instructions. She knows the shape of this arrangement. It is not new. One night, as you're combing your hair by the hearth, he mentions that you seem calmer now. Mature, he says, and smiles, as if it's a compliment. You thank him. He says he always admired your mind, and you laugh before you can stop yourself. He looks confused. You kiss his cheek and change the subject. The next morning he brings you a necklace. It is delicate, too thin for fashion, but tasteful. You know it is something he purchased years ago and forgot to give. You accept it anyway. You wear it when he is present, and store it away when he is not. You wonder privately whether he thinks of you as his final arrangement. You wonder whether he imagines you both growing old in this quiet spiral of repetition, music, wine, memory, and measured affection. You wonder whether you will let that happen. He does not speak of the future, but he speaks as though you are already part of it. You are not flattered. You are not offended. You are simply tired. A week later, you attend a masquerade. Not because you want to, and certainly not because you're invited in earnest, but because your presence is still expected at certain kinds of events. The hostess is the wife of a Venetian senator who once asked if you'd teach his daughter to recite Petrarch. He meant it as a compliment. You did not accept. Still, she includes you on her guest list out of obligation or curiosity, or both. The palace is enormous, candle-lit, overflowing with perfume and silk. Musicians play from a curtained alcove above the ballroom, their faces hidden behind embroidered masks. Guests drift through rooms like phantoms, every one of them veiled in fabric and artifice. Laughter echoes in places where no one is smiling. Eyes peer through gold-trimmed slits. Lips press against crystal goblets, and no one seems entirely certain who they're speaking to. You wear a gown of deep blue and silver with a matching half mask that leaves only your mouth and jaw visible. Your hair is pinned high with mother-of-pearl combs, and your earrings swing just enough to catch the light when you turn your head. You look stunning and indistinguishable. That is the point. You arrive alone. Your steward vanishes into the crowd as soon as you cross the threshold. A mutual understanding. Your patron is not present. He prefers quieter events these days, or claims to. You do not press. His absence is a gift. You move through the rooms slowly, accepting wine, exchanging pleasantries with figures who greet you as if you're familiar. Some are, Others only pretend. You are approached by a poet who once praised your voice in a sonnet. He does not recognize you. You say nothing. You drift onward. A woman brushes past you and murmurs something unkind. You cannot tell whether it is meant for you specifically, or simply for whoever wears your mask. You say nothing. The music swells. A man in red bows low and asks you to dance. You decline. He bows again and leaves without offence. He too does not recognize you. You find yourself near the grand staircase, where trays of marzipan and candied violets are being offered. You take one, more out of politeness than hunger, and listen to the conversation nearby. Diplomats are arguing over trade routes. A visiting poet is quoting Cicero in poor Latin. Someone mentions the name of the new courtesan, the one with the peach sleeves. You chew slowly and imagine your name falling out of their mouths, the way pastry crumbles between your teeth. You wander into a quieter room lined with tapestries and low benches. A few masked guests lounge against cushions, drinking slowly and murmuring behind fans. A servant refills your glass. You sit and let the music fade into the walls. For a moment, you forget what your voice sounds like. You're still seated there when a man stumbles in. Older, florid, unmasked. He's drunk in a way that suggests wealth rather than desperation. His robes are velvet, too warm for the room, and his shoes are covered in the dust of the courtyard. He looks around, unsteady, then grins when he sees you. "There you are," he slurs, approaching too quickly. You rise, cautious but not alarmed. Drunkenness at these events is common, expected, even performed. You step back politely and incline your head, waiting for him to retreat. He does not. Instead, he steps closer, grips your wrist too tightly, and leans in with breath that reeks of cheap wine and sugared almonds. "Didn't think they let your kind in here," he says, his voice wet with amusement. "But I suppose even the street girls can afford masks now, can't they?" You freeze. For a moment it doesn't register. Not because you're surprised, you've heard worse from better, but because the mask has made you forget. You forgot that without your name, your gown, your careful appointments, you are no one. Just another woman in painted silk, smiling for attention. You pull your arm back. "You're mistaken," you say evenly. "I am a guest." He laughs loudly. "Of course you are," he says, reaching for your waist. "A guest with a very generous hourly rate." You do not slap him. You do not shout. You know better. You step back again, straighten your spine, and look him in the eye. "My patron will be along shortly," you lie. I suggest you remove your hand. For a moment, he wavers, caught between bravado and calculation. Then someone else enters the room, a younger man masked, glancing between you and the drunk. The older man releases you with a grunt and turns away, muttering something about mistaken identity. You exhale through your nose and smooth the front of your gown. The younger man says nothing. He nods once, perhaps out of sympathy or perhaps recognition. Then he disappears. You leave the room. You do not cry. You do not shake. You find the nearest corridor and step into the shadow of a marble column, where you adjust your mask and take 3 slow breaths. A servant passes without noticing you. Somewhere nearby, a woman laughs too loudly and the music begins a new set. You remain still for a long time. Eventually you return to the ballroom, make a few polite gestures to acquaintances who may or may not remember your name, and take your leave. You do not wait for your steward. You find a gondola on your own. The canal is quiet, the sky low with clouds, the moon hidden. You sit beneath your cloak and stare at the water, which reflects nothing. Back at your apartment, your maid helps you undress. She asks how the event went. You say it was pleasant. She says nothing more. She brushes out your hair and folds your gown carefully, checking for stains or snags. There are none. You sit before the mirror while she works. Your face looks paler than usual. You remove your earrings slowly, one by one. When she leaves, you remain seated. You think of the drunk man's words, not because they were unusual, but because they were possible, because no one in that room corrected him, because no one rushed to defend your name, your history, your veneer of dignity, because the mask stripped you of everything you spent years cultivating, and all that remained was a body in silk. You remember being 17, sitting before the glass as your maid pinned your hair. You remember the first time someone called you refined, educated, different. You remember how it felt the first time you were told you were not like the others. Now you understand the truth. You were always like the others. They just like pretending you weren't. You smile faintly into the mirror. The mask is gone, but your face feels no more visible than before. The morning after the masquerade, you rise early, not because you slept well, but because the light slipping through the shutters refuses to let you pretend. You sit before the mirror, with your hair unbound, your robe loose across your shoulders, and you squint into the glass, tilting your head to catch the angle of the sun. There it is, just beside your left eye, a line that was not there last month. You trace it once with your fingertip, then again with the tip of your kohl pencil. You blend the shadow outward, darkening the lid to disguise the texture, softening the edges until it reads as design, not flaw. You know how to hide things. You've done it for years. But still, the line remains. Your maid notices. Of course she does, but she says nothing. She only adjusts the angle of the mirror and shifts the tray of powders slightly to your left, where the light is less cruel. You thank her without meeting her eyes. You are not old. That would be dramatic. You are still beautiful, but you are no longer new. And in this profession, the distance between beautiful and new is wide enough to drown in. The changes come slowly at first. A glance that lingers too long on your hands. A patron who compliments your posture instead of your skin. A dressmaker who suggests higher necklines to emphasize elegance. You hear the shift in their voices before you see it in their eyes. You are still desired, but no longer chaste. You begin adjusting your colors. Darker reds, richer fabrics, more structured sleeves. You stop wearing flowers in your hair. You speak more softly at salons. Let others quote poetry first. Let your presence suggest refinement instead of seduction. The transition is subtle but calculated. You are not trying to be younger anymore. You are trying to be necessary. You begin to keep track of how many invitations arrive by name and how many arrive to the lady at such and such address. The balance shifts month by month. The ones that include your name begin to sound more like afterthoughts, the ones that don't begin to multiply. One evening you receive a letter from a diplomat you haven't seen in over a year. It is polite, affectionate, and unmistakably nostalgic. He writes as if you have already passed into legend. He calls you radiant as ever, then adds, "I hope the years have been kind." You reread the line twice. You do not respond. Your maid finds a strand of grey hair while braiding the sides of your temple. She plucks it silently and places it beneath a comb without comment. You feel the tug, but you do not flinch. The following week at a private salon you sit beside a younger courtesan who has recently arrived from Naples. She is lovely, flushed with wine and novelty and the thrill of being noticed. She laughs too easily, reveals too much shoulder, misquotes Horace, and charms everyone. You watch her with calm interest. You do not feel threatened. You feel removed. When she excuses herself to refill her glass, a baron beside you leans in and murmurs, "She reminds me of you, years ago." You smile and nod as though he has offered a compliment. He believes he has. You increase your use of powder. You begin adding crushed pearl to your cheek balm for brightness. You switch to rose-coloured salves for your lips instead of the deep wine tones you once favoured. You reduce your time in the sun, citing migraines. You decline invitations that require you to dance. You rehearse smiles in the mirror until they lift your cheekbones rather than crease them. The old merchant still visits, though less frequently now. His conversation has become meandering, repetitive, fond. He tells stories you've already heard, brings pastries you no longer eat, forgets which poets you favour. He asks if you're happy. You tell him yes. He believes you. One afternoon you find yourself alone in your sitting room, dressed and powdered and perfectly poised, and no one arrives. The appointment was penciled in. The steward dispatched. The wine chilled. But the door does not open. An hour passes, then two. You do not remove your gown. You sit still like a portrait until the light fades. Your maid brings you tea. You do not drink it. You lie awake that night, listening to the water slap the canal wall. It is a familiar sound, soothing, predictable. You wonder if the younger courtesan hears it with the same comfort, or if it still feels romantic to her. like a lover whispering at her window. 2 days later, a letter arrives. It is from a young man you barely know, a minor noble's second son. He writes with excessive flourish, calling you Venice's most enduring flower. He asks you to join him at a small gathering in the Giudecca, promising poetry, song, and a few admiring eyes. You do not need to ask how he found your name. Someone likely whispered it to him as a joke. You fold the letter carefully, set it on your desk, and do not reply. 3 nights later, he appears at the theatre. He does not see you, though you see him. He is seated with a group of younger men, all dressed too brightly and laughing too loudly. He is flushed with the thrill of his own invitation, scanning the balconies between acts. When the curtain falls, he turns toward the shadows. Looking, you step back behind the curtain before he sees you. Later, as you're exiting through the private hall, your steward stops you. "That boy," he says. "He's asked about you twice this week." You say nothing. He continues. "Should I tell him you're unavailable?" You nod. "Indefinitely," you add. He bows. You refuse his invitation because you know you're not what he wants. The winter is long and the invitations dwindle. At first, you tell yourself it's the weather. The canals ice over in strange patterns, brittle as sugar glass, and the wind presses itself against your shutters like a restless spirit. No one wants to throw parties in this cold. No one wants to cross the Grand Canal in damp velvet. It's simply a seasonal lull. You've seen it before. But as the days drag on and the ice remains, and your name is not whispered beneath a single seal, you begin to understand. This is not a pause. This is the beginning of something slower, quieter, harder to reverse. You still dress each morning. You still sit before the mirror. You still powder your skin and stain your lips and arrange your hair in whatever style is currently favoured by girls with newer gowns. You do not leave the house without a reason, but you make sure you could if needed. That illusion must be maintained. Your maid continues her duties without comment. She lays out the jewellery even when there's nowhere to go. She mends hems that will never be admired. She lights candles in the receiving room just in case someone arrives. You never ask her why she bothers, you already know. If she stops preparing, it becomes real. You write letters occasionally. Some of them are business inquiries, about poetry readings, confirmations of previous engagements, graceful expressions of interest with flattering restraint. Others are personal, or close to it. Notes to old patrons you haven't seen in a year or more, written in the tone of a woman who is far too busy to chase anyone but kind enough to remember those who once entertained her. Few replies arrive, the ones that do are thin, apologetic, vague. The rest go unanswered. You begin skipping the perfume. The firewood arrives late, the stew is thinner. The wine is cheaper, though you still decant it into your good crystal. Pride is not a virtue, but it is the only armour you have left. The tailor sends word that your last commission has been delayed again. Something about fabric shortages and backlogged orders. You do not press. You know the truth. You are no longer his most important client. He has younger girls now, ones who still bring in men with full purses and reputations to maintain. You think of visiting the salon of an old friend, another courtesan who managed to climb the social ladder, into something like respectability. You imagine arriving unannounced, acting surprised, offering compliments, pretending you still belong in her circle. But the thought exhausts you before you've even stood up. Instead, you remain by the window. You watch the grey sky darken too early. You watch gondolas move like insects across black water. You count how many lamps are lit in the palazzo across the canal, fewer than last year. Your patron, the old one, the one who once adored you, does not visit anymore. You are not sure when he stopped. There was no argument, no goodbye, just a missed week. And then another. You think he may have died, but no one sends word. You receive a letter one morning. It is addressed to you properly, in a careful hand, on thick paper. You open it slowly, savouring the weight. It is a bill. You fold it in half and place it in the drawer with the others. You still receive small gestures, a basket of oranges from an aging poet, a brief note from a merchant you once entertained now living in Florence. He asks after your health and signs his name with unnecessary flourish. You do not reply, but you place the note beneath your pillow and read it again 2 nights later. Sometimes your maid enters and finds you staring into space, still in your robe at midday. She says nothing, only tidies the room with quieter hands than usual. You try to write once more, a poem this time, just for yourself, something you haven't done since your debut. You sit with your quill for over an hour, but no words come. Eventually you place the parchment in the drawer beside the unpaid bills. Inkless, blank. One evening a musician knocks. Not one you know. Young, unfamiliar, nervous. He says he was told to come here once, years ago. He carries a lute and has the wrong shoes for this weather. You tell him gently that he's mistaken. He apologizes and disappears down the stairs. You never hear his name. Later that night, you find the necklace the old patron gave you, the one that was too thin, too sentimental. You place it on your vanity and stare at it for a long time. It catches no light. The following week, your steward quietly mentions that the wine merchant has remarried. You nod and change the subject. The man you once belonged to now belongs to someone else. That is the natural way of things. You do not feel betrayed, you feel replaced. You start walking the apartment in small circuits, not because you need the exercise, but because you need the movement. The pacing keeps your thoughts from settling too heavily. You pass the harp you no longer touch, the tapestries whose stories you've forgotten, the books with broken spines. You touch the spines anyway, gently, as though they might still open for you. Sometimes you hum songs you can't remember the words to. Old verses, fragments, things you once used to charm men you no longer see. The notes feel stale on your tongue. You begin refusing mirrors after dusk. One day, you return from a brief walk and find your maid at the hearth. She's kneeling with a bundle of papers in her hands, not sorting them, not filing them, just staring at them as if waiting for them to speak. You recognize the letters by their creases, the way some still carry scent or wax seals long cracked. She turns to you and lifts the bundle slightly. "They haven't been paid," she says softly. You say nothing. She asks, "Should I?" You nod once. She leans forward and places the letters one by one into the fire. They curl in silence. The ink darkens and bleeds. The edges curl inward, like the petals of dying flowers. The wax melts, and the flames shift. Blue, then orange, then back to soft yellow. You do not look away. Eventually a visitor arrives. Your maid announces him softly, not with interest, not with concern, but with a tone so neutral it practically disappears. "A gentleman caller," she says. "A minor noble." He did not give a name. You glance up from your embroidery, something half finished and half forgotten, and set it gently on the table. You smooth your dress and check your hair in the long mirror by the door. There's a crease forming above your brow that powder no longer hides. Not entirely. You dab a little rouge on your cheeks anyway. He's waiting in the receiving room. Alone, awkward, overdressed. His shoes are worn, and his doublet is just a season out of fashion. The sort of man who wants to be mistaken for someone important, or at least someone recently relevant. You recognize the look immediately. You wore it yourself once, in your own way. When he turns to greet you, his smile is quick and too wide. His compliments arrive in a practiced tumble. How lovely you are. How luminous your skin. How honoured he is. How long he has admired you. It's not the words that bother you. It's the rhythm. You've heard this melody before. Too sweet and too fast. The kind of flattery that feels more like rehearsal than sincerity. You incline your head graciously and offer him wine. He accepts, takes a nervous sip and remarks on the weather. You reply with the right degree of warmth. Not enthusiasm, not coldness. Measured, professional. He relaxes slightly, settling into the cushions as if trying to own them. He tells you a little of himself, or the version of himself he has prepared. Second son of a provincial house, educated in Padua. Fond of music. Fluent in French. He speaks as if he is still being interviewed for courtly relevance. You let him continue. You smile when appropriate. You nod when expected. You've performed for worse. Eventually, he stops talking and looks at you. Really looks. His gaze lingers, not with hunger, but with hunger's echo, the longing of someone who still remembers what wanting used to feel like. He says, more softly now, that he has admired you for years, that he always dreamed he might speak with you just once, that he knows he isn't like your other admirers. You consider correcting him. Then you don't. Instead, you reach for the lute beside your chair and ask if he'd like a song. He nods eagerly. You play something simple, something slow. Your fingers falter slightly on the second verse, but he does not seem to notice. When you finish, he applauds as if you'd performed in a palace. He doesn't touch you, not yet. Instead, he leans forward and tells you that he is different from the others, that he sees you not as an object, not as a courtesan, but as a person. He says it as though it's a gift. He says it as though no one has ever said it before. You smile and pour more wine. He stays through the afternoon. You talk of poetry, of Rome, of old music and older rumours. He tells you that your voice is like something carved from silk. He says you deserve better patrons, finer ones. He says he would keep you himself if only he had the means. You ask nothing about his finances. You do not need to. You know he will not pay. But he watches you with such earnest admiration that you let him stay anyway. You let him believe this is courtship, that it matters, that it might last, because some part of you still wants to believe it too, that this is a performance and you're still the leading role. Eventually, as the sun sinks low behind the rooftops and the canal darkens to ink, he reaches for your hand. You let him take it. His palm is warm, a little damp. His eyes search yours, as though waiting for permission to believe in something. You give him that permission, if only for a moment. He kisses you, and you allow it. You kiss him back, softly, slowly, with just enough pressure to leave the impression of passion without the reality of hunger. It is not unpleasant. It is not thrilling. It simply is. When he draws back, he looks dazed, like a man who has glimpsed a painting he once forgot he loved. "I will write," he says, as he rises and straightens his coat. "Very soon." You nod, your expression perfect. He walks to the door and pauses, hand on the handle. "I hope you'll remember me," he says. You do not say that you won't need to, that the world already has a drawer for men like him, tucked somewhere between apology and forgetfulness. You smile and say, "Of course." The door closes softly. You do not ask your maid to see him out. You sit by the window for a long time, watching the street lamps blink to life one by one. The room smells faintly of citrus and worn leather. You notice distantly that one of the chair legs is beginning to wobble. You remove your necklace. You do not undress. You simply sit and wait for the silence to return. You know he will not write. You know he left nothing behind. No coin, no seal, no name. You let him go anyway, because in some quiet part of you, the part that still straightens her back when someone enters the room, the part that still checks her reflection twice before exiting a carriage, the part that still believes in applause, you need to believe he meant it, because if you don't, then this wasn't a performance, and if it wasn't a performance, then it was just your life. One morning you wake to silence and grey light, and the steady drip of rain from the iron gutter outside your window. Your servant doesn't knock. She no longer announces breakfast or visitors or anything at all. There's nothing left to announce. You rise slowly, not out of duty or habit, but because staying in bed feels like waiting for something. And you've learned that waiting is a kind of humiliation. You dress plainly. The embroidered gowns are too fine for this kind of day, and too tight in the shoulders now. You've lost weight, not dramatically, just enough for the tailor to notice and no one else. You leave your hair unpinned and your lips bare. You no longer need the armour. You're not expecting to be seen. The canals are quieter in winter. The gondoliers speak more softly. The markets close earlier, and the masks grow heavier with rain. You don't take your usual route. Instead, you follow the smaller paths, the ones that wind behind chapels past shuttered glassmakers' shops and half-swept doorsteps. You walk without purpose, or rather, you walk with the only purpose left to you, not being still. A pair of washerwomen glance up as you pass. You hear one of them whisper your name, or something like it, and then snort. It isn't cruelty, it's boredom. You're no longer scandalous enough to hate, just familiar, and then forgotten. You reach the bridge by the old spice warehouse, the one where you once met a patron in secret, your gloves damp with perfume, your smile still convincing. You pause there for a moment, watching the water slap against the moss-dark stones. A gondola drifts past, empty. The gondolier doesn't look at you. You could be anyone. A maid, a widow, a merchant's sister. No one worth remembering. You sit on the edge of the canal and breathe in the smell of salt and mildew and the faintest trace of oranges rotting in crates somewhere upriver. You press your palms into the stone and feel the cold rise through your sleeves. For a moment, you think about taking off your shoes and dipping your feet in, but you don't. The water is filthy, and you have no one to ruin your dress for any more. Back home, your servant is mending a hem with slow, even stitches. She does not look up as you enter. You nod once, not a greeting, but an acknowledgement. She nods back. The two of you have developed a language made entirely of small, silent gestures. It's more honest than most conversations you've had in salons. That evening, you sort through your ledger. Not the public one, the one you used to show patrons, the one with exaggerated figures and imaginary expenses, carefully curated to imply need without desperation. No, this is the other one, the private one. Real numbers, real names, real debts. It is thinner than it used to be. Many pages are blank. A few have been scratched out entirely. You run your fingers over the ink, half faded now. You remember each entry, but not always fondly. Some names sting, some blur. A few make you smile briefly. There is one name you don't remember at all. A single line, hastily written with no amount beside it, just initials. You stare at it for a long time, trying to summon a face. You fail. You scratch it out and close the book. The next day, you receive a letter. Not from a patron, not from anyone you know. It's a notice from the guild registry, a reminder, coldly phrased, that you have not paid your annual dues, that your license as a cortigiana honesta will expire at month's end. That reinstatement will require both a petition and a fine. You set it aside. The month ends. You do not petition. A week later, a clerk visits the house. He is young and impatient and smells faintly of chalk. He does not sit. He does not look at you directly. He asks your name twice. First out of formality, and then again when he seems unsure that you are the woman he was sent to find. You confirm it. He checks his list. He makes a small mark beside it. You understand, he says, that after today you're no longer licensed to entertain clients within the city of Venice. You nod. He looks relieved. He leaves without saying goodbye. Your maid clears away the chair he didn't use. The next morning, you dress again in plain silk, pin your hair without help, and walk to the small chapel near the fishmonger's square. You sit in the back pew where the light doesn't quite reach and listen to the priest read a sermon to no one in particular. You mouth the prayers. You do not speak them. On the way home, you pass two girls standing outside a perfumer's stall. One has the bright look of someone just beginning her career. The other is already practicing the art of appearing uninterested in everyone. You glance once politely. They glance back without recognition. You wonder what they've heard about you, if anything. Probably nothing. By evening, the rain returns. You light a single candle. You eat broth. You place the guild letter on the fire and watch the edge curl inward. When the flame reaches your name, it vanishes like it was never there. No scandal, no drama, no audience, just a silence that deepens. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not of love, nor scandal, nor even disgrace, but of slow, fading, quiet erasure, and the price of being beautiful in a city that only values what it forgets. If you'd like early access to more of these soft-spoken histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other historical topics you'd like to see explored. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis.